Hello, friends. We are back. It is Tuesday for social studies. And last week we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. I did a read aloud for you. And on Friday, uh, the teachers and I was able to hop in a couple classes, talked about some of the issues that are happening not only in Seattle, but around the world right now. So this week I'm going to continue to focus on some read alouds to kind of help us understand some more parts of history, learn little bit more about voting and how that impacts the laws and the way that people are treated in the US, and just have some stories about people and their own experiences. Over the weekend, many cities around the United States, all 50 states had Black Lives Matter protests for equality, to eliminate racism, to eliminate violence against Black people, and that's really promising because we're actually starting to see leaders, our mayors, our governors, our senators, our council members take notice and actually are changing um, some of the ways that we do things, not only in Seattle, but in other places around the country. And that's really a promising thing, with ultimately the goal being that we can eliminate, systemic racism and all those barriers that Black people and other people of color face in the U.S. and around the world. There's protests happening around the world as well. So it's a good thing. These are peaceful protests. Some of them do have a little bit of rioting, and maybe some people aren't doing what they're supposed to, but those are very small percentages, and those are sometimes people that want to cause trouble and not focus on the issue at hand. But right now, I think it's been a pretty positive weekend for the Black Lives Matter movement. We are seeing leaders of communities, like I said, enter into discussions with community members and other members of our government. So that's a very positive thing. Today I have a book for you to read. I don't think I've ever read this with you guys. I think it just came out this year, so I'm kind of excited to read this book. And it talks about kind of one family's search for equality and equity of education in the 1940s, I believe. So this is kind of pre civil rights era, pre like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. And this talks about a Mexican American family in California and Virginia. So it's a great little read. But the reason I'm reading this to you is so that you can see that what's happening in the United States and around the world now with the Black Lives Matter movement is not a new issue. It's something that has been a problem for over 400 years, going on 500 years. And that's why there is such a momentous push to make change, to make a difference, to make sure that we are all on the same page and treating each other with respect and integrity, and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity and access to all facets of life in the free world. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this book. When we're done with it, I don't have a worksheet for you today, but what I'd like you to do is maybe just leave a comment in the Teams page that a sentence or two that just says what you're thinking about when I was reading the book. Give me some thoughts. I was thinking about, I made a connection to, something new I learned, something interesting I thought was. So use some of those sentence starters to get you going, okay? All right, so I'll read the book and then I'll say goodbye at the end. All right, I hope you enjoy this read aloud, okay? Separate is never equal. Sylvia Mendez and her family's fight for desegregation. It is written by Dunkan Tonatiuh, winner of the Pura Belprix Award. Separate is never equal. Sylvia had on her black shoes. They were shiny new. Her hair was perfectly parted in 2 long trenzas. It was her first day at the Westminster School. The halls were crowded with students. She was looking for her locker when a young white boy pointed at her and yelled, "Go back to the Mexican school! You don't belong here!" For the rest of the day, Sylvia did not speak or introduce herself in classes. She kept her head down when walking in the halls. When she got home that afternoon, she told her mom, "Felicitas, what had happened?" "I don't want to go to that school anymore. The kids are mean." "Sylvia," said her mother, "no sabes que por eso luchamos. Don't you know that is why we fought?" 3 years earlier, in the summer of 1944, Sylvia and her brothers Jerome and Gonzalo Jr. and their parents had moved from the crowded city of Santa Ana, California, to a nearby farm in Westminster. Her father, Gonzalo Mendez, had labored for years as a field worker, picking grapes and oranges. Now he was leasing a farm. He was going to be the boss. On their new farm, they were going to grow asparagus, chiles, and tomatoes. As the summer came to an end and the first day of school neared, Aunt Soledad drove Sylvia and her brothers and their cousins, Alice and Virginia, to the public school on 17th Street so they could all enroll. Sylvia was going to enter 3rd grade, Gonzalo was going to enter 2nd, and Jerome 1st. What a handsome building, thought Sylvia as they pulled into the parking lot. Tall trees lined the street in front of the school. There was a playground with monkey bars and a red swing. When they walked into the school, they noticed that the hallways were spacious and clean. "I'm here to enroll the children in school," said Aunt Soledad when they arrived at the principal's office. The secretary gave Aunt Soledad 2 enrollment forms, one for Alice and one for Virginia, but she did not give any enrollment forms for Sylvia and her brothers. "They cannot attend this school," said the secretary. "They must go to the Mexican school." "Why do I have to go to the Mexican school?" Sylvia wondered. She was not Mexican. She was American. She spoke perfect English. Her father was from Mexico, but he had become a U.S. citizen. Her mother was from Puerto Rico, which was a U.S. territory. Aunt Soledad was upset, but we all live in this part of town. Sylvia looked at her cousins. They had light skin and long auburn hair, and their last name was Verrui. Their father was Mexican, but of French descent. Then she looked at her brothers and at her own hands and bare arms. She wondered, is it because we have brown skin and thick black hair, and our last name is Mendez? "Rules are rules," said the secretary. "The Mendez children have to go to the Mexican school." "I will not be enrolling any of them then," said Aunt Soledad, and she stormed out of the office, taking Sylvia and the other children with her. When they arrived home, Aunt Soledad told Sylvia's father what had happened. Mr. Mendez told her not to worry. It had to be a mistake. He would take care of it. He was a businessman, and he was used to dealing with people. The next day, Mr. Mendez met with Mr. Harris, the superintendent of the Westminster School. Mr. Mendez explained that his family had just moved to a nearby farm. The public school on 17th Street is the closest school to our house, and my children should attend it. "Your children have to go to the Mexican school," said Mr. Harris. "But why?" asked Mr. Mendez. He was not given an answer, other than that is how it is done. In the following days, Mr. Mendez met with Mr. Atkinson, the county superintendent, Mr. Harris's superior, and then with the school board, which oversaw all of the schools in Orange County. But they all said the same thing. Your children have to go to Mexican school. But why? Mr. Mendez kept asking. No one could give him a satisfactory answer. Why do you think Mr. Mendez, the superintendent, and the secretary said they had to go to a Mexican school? That fall, Sylvia and her brothers had to attend the Hoover Elementary, better known as the Mexican School, on Olive Street in the city of Westminster. The building was a clapboard shack, and the halls were not spacious or clean. A cow pasture surrounded the school. The students had to eat their lunch outside, and flies would land on their food. There was an electric wire that surrounded the pasture to keep the cows in. If you touched it, you would receive a shock. The school did not have a playground, not even a swing. Mendez family did not give up. Time and again, Sylvia heard her father talk with coworkers, friends, and other parents. It's not fair that our kids have to go to an inferior school, he said. It's not only the building that's a problem. The teachers at the school don't care about our children's education. They expect them to drop out by the 8th grade. How will our children succeed and become doctors, lawyers, or teachers? Mr. Mendez created a group called Parents Association of Mexican American Children. He tried to collect signatures for a petition to integrate schools so that all children, regardless of their skin color or background, could have the same opportunities. But every time he asked someone to sign the petition, he would get the same answer. No queremos problemas. We don't want any problems. Many of the parents worked on farms owned by white families and feared they would lose their jobs if they supported the petition. One day, a truck driver overheard Mr. Mendez trying to convince a worker to sign his petition. You know, said the truck driver, you could file a lawsuit. The truck driver told Mr. Mendez about a lawyer named David Marcus, who had filed a lawsuit on behalf of all the people in San Bernardino and had helped them integrate the public pools there. Integrate means to combine or put together. At the time, not only were schools segregated, but also other public places as well, such as pools, parks, and movie theaters. Some business even had signs that read, "No dogs or Mexicans allowed." Oh. Mr. Mendez decided right then and there to hire Mr. Marcus, even if it meant having to spend all of his savings to do so. Over the next few months, Mr. Mendez and Mr. Marcus traveled all over Orange County, looking for people who had experienced similar problems. Sylvia watched her father leave early in the morning. Sometimes she saw him come home in the evening, but often she only heard his footsteps when he got in, late at night. While she was away, Sylvia's mother had to take care of the farm. Mrs. Mendez would get Sylvia and her brothers ready for school, and then she would go out in the fields. She started the irrigation system, drove the tractor, oversaw the workers, and solved any problems that arose. With the help of Mr. Marcus, Mr. Mendez found and talked with other families who were dealing with segregation. One of them was the Estrada family. Mr. Estrada had fought in World War II. He had risked his life next to Americans of all races and backgrounds. But when he returned to America from the war, he found out that his children were not allowed to attend school with white children. Es una injustica, said Mr. Mendez. It's an injustice. The Estrada family joined the Mendez case, and so did 3 more families. The families were from different school districts in Orange County. Westminster, where Sylvia lived, Garden Grove, El Modena, and Santa Ana. Mr. Marcus wanted to show that the segregation of students affected not only Sylvia and her brothers, but more than 5,000 children in the public school system all over Orange County. On March 2nd, 1945, Mr. Marcus went to the courthouse and filed a lawsuit. A trial was held at a courthouse in Los Angeles. Sylvia and her family dressed in their best clothes and sat in the courtroom to listen. The hearing lasted 5 days. Each day, Mr. Marcus called to the stands parents from the different school districts in Orange County and the superintendents from each district too. On the first day, Mr. Kent, the superintendent of Garden Grove District, was questioned. He said that he sent children to the Mexican school to help them improve their English. That is a lie, thought Sylvia. Her English was as good as any of the English of the children at Westminster School. Do you give the children any tests? Asked Mr. Marcus. Mr. Kent claimed he did. We do so by talking to them. That is another lie, Sylvia wanted to yell. No one had questioned her. They rejected her from the Westminster School without asking her a thing. For what other reasons do you send children to Mexican school? Asked Mr. Marcus. Sylvia and her family braced themselves to hear what Mr. Kent would say next. For their social behavior, they need to learn cleanliness of mind, manner, and dress. They are not learning that at home. They have problems with lice, impetigo, and tuberculosis. They have generally dirty hands, face, neck, and ears. The Mendez family and others in the room stared at Mr. Kent in disbelief. What he was saying was not true. It was degrading. How many of the 292 children at the Marcus School are inferior to whites in personal hygiene? Asked Mr. Marcus. At least 75%. And in their scholastic ability? 75%. And in what other respects are they inferior? In the economic outlook, in their clothing, and in their ability to take part in activities at school. Do you believe that white students are superior to Mexicans in the respects that you have mentioned? Asked Mr. Mendez. Yes. And is that one of the reasons they are being segregated? Yes. Time and again, Mr. Mendez had asked, why can't my children attend the Westminster School? Now he had his answer. The superintendent thought that white students were superior to Mexicans. Is that true, friends? No, it is not true. On the second day, Mr. Marcus called to the stand a 14-year-old student from the Mexican school in El Modena. Her name was Carol Torres. She spoke perfect English. It was clear she had not been sent to the Mexican school because she had problems speaking the language, as the defense lawyers claimed. Mr. and Mrs. Mendez were questioned on the third and fourth day, and so was Mr. Harris, the superintendent of the Westminster School. Sylvia was not called to the stand, but she was ready to testify if they asked her to. She tried looking her best every morning and practiced what she would answer. On the fifth and final day of the hearing, Mr. Marcus called to the stand 2 education specialists to explain why it was bad to segregate children into different schools. Segregation tends to give an aura of inferiority. In order to have the people of the United States understand one another, It is necessary for them to live together, and the public school is the one mechanism where all the children of all the people go, said one of them. The judge nodded his head. He seemed to agree with them. Remember, students, this is taking place in 1945, so this is about 60 years ago. It's quite some time ago. But these are issues. The reason we're reading this is because these are issues that people are still facing today. Judge Paul McCormick took almost a year to give his decision, but when he did, he ruled in favor of the Mendez family. In his ruling, he said that public education must be open to all children by unified school association regardless of lineage. This meant that everyone must be allowed to attend school no matter what his or her race or background. The Mendez victory made newspaper headlines. Sylvia's family was ecstatic, but they did not have much time to celebrate because the school board appealed the case. That is, they asked for another trial. Sylvia and her family had to go to the state court in San Francisco and argue the case again. Oh my gosh. In the new trial, the Mendez family received support from the League of United Latin American Citizens, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Japanese American Citizens League, the American Jewish Congress, and other organizations. These groups sent letters with information relevant to the case and asked the judge to rule in favor of the Mendez family. So that's something I want you to think about right there. We're going to pause for a minute. The League of United Latin American Citizens, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Japanese American Citizens League, the American Jewish Congress, and other organizations. So back then in 1945, much like today in 2020, people from all kinds of groups, all kinds of colors, all kinds of backgrounds and cultures and countries are coming together for the Black Lives Matter movement. So just like the Mendez family received support from many people, right now for Black Lives Matter, many people are supporting this very important cause. Sylvia was amazed that people of different backgrounds and from different parts of the country who had never met her family were getting involved in the case and trying to help them. But her mother said, "Cuando la cosa es justa, los demás te siguen." When you fight for justice, others will follow. I love that quote. When you fight for justice, others will follow. On April 15th, 1947, the judges in the Court of Appeals in San Francisco ruled in favor of the Mendez family again. That June, Governor Earl Warren signed the law that said all children in California were allowed to go to school together, regardless of race, ethnicity, or language. So remember, said Sylvia's mother, we fought to make sure you could attend a good school and have equal opportunities. Sylvia thought long and hard about what her mother said. The next day, she returned to the Westminster School. This time, she did not listen to any whispers. She ignored the children who pointed at her and called her names. Instead, she held her head high. Her parents had fought not only for her and her brothers, but for all their classmates. Looking around, she saw that other children were smiling at her. By the end of the day, she had made a friend. And at the end of the school year, she had made many friends of different backgrounds. She knew that her family had fought for that. that's the end. All right. I know that story was a little bit long, but I hope you stuck with it and listened to the whole thing. I think it has a really powerful message. And the message is one that really comes through today. It's very similar to what's going on today. All these groups of people coming together to fight for a group that is being marginalized, that is being treated unfairly, that is not receiving equal resources, and most importantly, that we're seeing with the violence that happens toward Black people. So in the story, Sylvia's family received help. And one thing to note is this story took place in California in between 1945 and 1947. So while the judge ruled that all students, all children, whether you were Mexican or Japanese or Black in California, could go to any public school and receive equal education, remember that was not the case everywhere in America. That was only in one place in America at that time. And remember, this fight had to keep going and going. And we learned, we've read the Ruby Bridges story. We've read all about Rosa Parks and the Civil Rights Movement with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, even in the 60s and 70s. So this wasn't a one-time thing where everything suddenly got better. And the fight still goes on today. Remember, we are allies. You are an ally. And what does ally mean? We talked about that last week. An ally is someone who supports our friends that are underrepresented, that are treated badly. And we are an ally for the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay. Today, I would just like you to leave a comment, maybe a connection you made, a connection I made, a text-to-text, text-to-self, text-to-world connection. You could say something you're thinking, something I thought, something new I learned. So just leave me a comment below in the Teams page, okay? All right, I hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to talking with you again soon. All right, adios.